Fresh off of Max Verstappen win in Spain, it's time to turn right back around in the hills of Austria. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're here to make our predictions for our next sprint weekend on the calendar. That's right, the Austrian Grand Prix weekend, one of my personal favorite racetracks on the F1 calendar because it always produces very exciting qualifying. I think the sprint here actually makes a lot of sense with such a short lap time. The race itself sometimes can be hit or miss. It really depends on what we got going on, but nonetheless, I am more than ready to jump right back on into this thing and make my predictions for what I think is going to happen this week in Austria. Now, something you'll notice in this video as well is along the bottom of the video as I go through the predictions, I let my community also voice their opinion on what they think is going to happen. If you're interested in hopping in and joining in on our little, points predictions challenge we have going on this year, head to the link down below in the description, join the Discord, and then leading up to every single Grand Prix weekend on the calendar, I make a call for predictions of biggest positive surprise, biggest disappointment, our qualifying top three. Since it is a sprint weekend, we also do sprint winner and then our race podium, and then we wrap things up with our one crazy prediction. So I hope you enjoy the video. Let's go ahead, let's hop on into this thing with our biggest positive surprise. Let's kick things off with our biggest positive surprise, but first, if you haven't already, subscribe down below if you enjoy F1 or sim racing content. We do a little bit of both here on this channel. We'd love to have you grow in our little community here. Also, like I mentioned, head to the link below in the Discord. We have a lot of fun chatting nonsense in there on and in between race weekends. As well as leave comments down below what you think is going to happen along with us and make your predictions, because I'd love to see who can absolutely nail it and who is miles and miles and miles away. Or should I say kilometers? I'm really not sure. We'll go with miles because we are American around here. But nonetheless, let's go ahead. Let's kick things off. Biggest positive surprise this week. I have gone for a driver on a team that I think should perform pretty well around here thanks to a very special power unit in the back of that thing. I have gone for Nico Hülkenberg. Nico has driven wonderfully this year on his way to 5 P11 finishes out of the first 10 rounds this season, and I think that really goes to show both not only where he's at as a driver, but I think a good chunk of it is also how big a step the Haas car has taken since where they were last year. Last year, that car destroyed tires on a level I've never seen before, but this year it seems like it actually is very much more manageable. They still have the benefit of the straight line speed if they can get the setup right, and I think Austria definitely is one of those tracks that I think we could see a very good result out of Nico. We saw him do very, very well last year in the sprint race. Obviously, that is a much shorter race, and obviously they didn't have to deal with a tire wear problem, but this year I think they have it under wraps, and I think the Haas car actually bodes very, very well this weekend, and so I think we're gonna see Haas back in the points finally for the first time in a very long time, especially after Alpine jumped us in the constructors standings last weekend. I would love to get right back on them on that, and I think we're going to see a special weekend from Nico in this one. Moving on to our pick for biggest disappointment, and this week I've gone for Daniel Ricciardo as my biggest disappointment. VCARB did not look good last week in Spain, and I don't think it's going to get much better. They looked lost in the woods, and it just really, I don't see it getting any better for them this weekend, especially at a track like the Red Bull Ring, which while in its simplicity I think should make it easier on them, I do think that the upgrades that they brought here recently have just not worked, and they're really struggling to understand exactly what's going on with their car. And so I think after beating Yuki a couple of race weekends in a row, I think it could be a return to form for Daniel, struggling around the Red Bull Ring and really just running around at the back again. I don't think he has the car to really do much here this weekend. Obviously, I could be proven wrong, but I think this is just a lot of a vibes pick just because I was really put off by Daniel and VCARB last week, and I don't know if it's going to get better anytime soon. But yeah, unfortunately, as much as it pains me to say, Danny Rick, you are my pick for biggest disappointment this weekend. All right, here is where our predictions take a very confident and really out on a limb pose, right? Because in my qualifying for the Grand Prix, it is a sprint weekend, but these are qualifying predictions for the Grand Prix on Sunday. Let's start with P3, which I think is where I'm going out on the most limb I have for this team in a very long time. I have picked George Russell to come home in P3 in qualifying this weekend. George obviously had a fantastic start to the Spain Grand Prix. He qualified P4. He had pretty solid pace all around, but inevitably just kind of fell back on a obviously not the best strategy, but nonetheless, George is driving very well for a Mercedes team that finally seems like they might be figuring out what they're doing with their car. We've had two good weekends in a row for Mercedes, and I think we might see it again, basically for the exact opposite reasons that I picked a VCARB driver to be my biggest disappointment. I think that the Red Bull Ring proves an opportunity for Mercedes to really cement themselves and use the simplicity and the understanding that they definitely have of the Red Bull Ring to take that step forward and continue to run near the front, especially also with Ferrari struggling as much as they are as well. So George Russell, my pick for P3. Moving on to P2 in this one, I have gone for Lando Norris. Now, Lando did take pole in Spain, and he ended up not taking the win in that one. I do think that the gap between Red Bull and McLaren is probably about as close as it's ever been to seeing McLaren take the top spot in terms of car performance. But obviously, it's all going to come down to the driver difference. And while I do think Lando is going to put it very, very close to pole, I don't think he's going to unseat my pick for pole position, Max Verstappen. I think the Red Bull Ring is going to be just one of his tracks. The simplicity, the familiarity, obviously it being a home race for Red Bull is going to be a massive bump as well. I do see this as a Max Verstappen pole position. And I don't see a lot, maybe not a lot getting in the way of that. Obviously, like I mentioned, the gap between McLaren and Red Bull is a lot closer now. But at the same time, the gap between Max and even Lando, I think, is a little wider than most people want to admit. Let's go quickly on to our pick for sprint winner. It is a sprint Grand Prix weekend here. It's going to be, I believe the sprint is not that many laps, like 20 laps-ish. I feel like I should have looked that up beforehand, but never mind. We move, we groove. So it's really just a mad dash, and I think this one is going to be all on qualifying for this one as well. And my pick for sprint winner is Max Verstappen. Now, I know what you're saying. I don't think it's going to necessarily come down to a Max runaway weekend, but at the same time, over a sprint weekend and a sprint race, and especially at a track like Austria, where especially with the Grand Prix the next day, I think drivers take it a lot easier in the sprint. And even though last year it ended up being an absolute banger, I think that had to do more with the changeable conditions in the rain, the wet to dry session that we got in that race. And so I think the sprint race could be a little more processional on this year, and I think Max is going to come home to take the win. Before we jump into our race podium predictions, let me know how you're doing down in the comment section below. You following along? If so, I encourage you to do so. I would love to see your predictions down there. But without further ado, let's move on to my picks for the race podium. And now, once again, this is where we are going out on a limb for a team that I hadn't gone out on a limb for a while. In P3 for the back-to-back podium finishes is Lewis Hamilton. Now, George, obviously I have qualifying in P3, but one of Lewis's and George's strange, relationships this year is that George usually out-qualifies Lewis, but they still end up very close or behind Lewis in the race. And I think we could see something very similar here. I do think Lewis has taken a step forward here in the last couple of weekends, especially last week in Spain. Now, he does go very well around Spain, but I do think that's kind of give him the confidence to continue to move forward. And I think we're going to see back-to-back podium finishes for the 7-time World Drivers' Champion. Moving on to my pick for P2, I have gone for, drum roll please, Max Verstappen. Yes, that's right. I have Max finishing second in this one. I do think this is a track in a Grand Prix setting that definitely is more prone to these kinds of results just because it is a lot of close running. It really comes down to those micro adjustments, those micro decisions, and I do think that we might see a bit of, not necessarily a mistake, but I do think we might see some craziness going on this weekend, like Austria sometimes always seems to do. And so I have gone for a Max Verstappen P2 finish behind my pick for the race winner of the Austrian Grand Prix, Lando Norris. Now, this is a prediction that I think is going to be either feast or famine. I think Lando is absolutely fuming from his lack of win last week in Spain, and I think it's either going to be a Lando Norris win in the Grand Prix, or it's going to be a Lando Norris disaster class damage somewhere along the lines, messed up strategy, something, and he finishes almost near out of the points, if not all the way out of the points. I'm choosing to pick the former of the two. I apologize. Former of the two, and I'm picking Lando Norris to win the Austrian Grand Prix. I think he's going to come out fired up. I do think this is why I'm predicting Max to win the sprint, because I think Lando is going to be laying it all on the line for the Grand Prix on Sunday, and I think it's going to come home. I think it's coming to fruition. Lando Norris is my pick to win the Austrian Grand Prix. We're moving on to our final prediction. Man, that went by so fast. I hope you're as excited for this weekend as I am. And my one crazy prediction, I think, is going to be the cause of a lot of excitement for some and some detriment for some potential others. My one crazy prediction is that there will be at least 2 safety cars in the Grand Prix. I debated on making this across the weekend, but I'm going full on 2 safety cars in the Grand Prix. There has been a long string of races, it feels like, where just no safety cars, no yellow flags, or barely any yellow flags. I think Austria is a ripe position to absolutely lay down a banger, potentially, bunch the group back up and allow the leading group to kind of battle it out all the way to the end. So my prediction, at least 2 safety cars in this one. I can't decide if I want this one to come true or not. I do think that there's going to be a lot of emotions running hot this week, and I think it could lead to some mistakes, some collisions, maybe not all the way into DNFs, but that could also happen. But there's a lot of runoff in the Red Bull ring, so I don't know how many DNFs are going to be, but I think there could be a lot of mistakes, a lot of touches, a lot of contact on those long BRS straights and those hard braking zones. But time will tell. What do you guys think is going to happen? Let me know down in the comment section below. Guys, that wraps it up here. How excited are you for the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix? I've said it so many times this video, but I am so excited. I love this race. I love this track. It's so simple, and it just leads to just pure. It's almost all about who has what it takes to really just succeed around the Red Bull ring. It is absolutely unbelievable. I think qualifying is going to be a banger. I think the sprint could be fun, but I'm leaning more towards the Grand Prix being the main attraction of this one. But what do you guys think? I'd love to know. And once again, if you haven't already, subscribe down below. And if you enjoyed the video, please give me a like. It really helps me out. But guys, that is basically all I have for you here in this one. I can tell you I'm excited for as many times as I want to, but I'm going to leave it off here. I hope you enjoy the Grand Prix weekend. We'll be back once it's over to talk about what we saw and see how we did with these predictions. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.